Hello and welcome to another episode of Threat Update. This is a very special episode. Today we're doing an ultimate alliance. We're bringing together the Varonis channel and myself and Ryan O'Boyle. I'm Kilian and Ryan. And joining us, our special guest, a lot of you out on the internet might know him already, Kody from our SecurityFWD channel is joining us today for this great episode. Kody, will you say hi to the audience on YouTube?
Hey everyone, I'm really excited for this special crossover episode of the Hacking with Friends show / Threat Update. It's been a long time since Kilian has co-hosted the SecurityFWD channel, and it's really cool to see some of the stuff that we've been repping at the end of our show every week. So I'm happy to be on this very special super episode, I guess you would call it.
Yeah, I love it. And thanks for joining. And this is awesome. I know a lot of we have a lot of cross viewers, but you know, this is a great opportunity to also introduce you to Ryan. Ryan is on Threat Update with me every week. Ryan, say hi to Kody if you haven't been on stream with him before.
Hey, Kody, and hey, everybody. Thanks for having me on from the Varonis side.
Yeah, wonderful to have more nerds to hack with.
Oh, yeah, this is great. It's like hacking with more friends. So I wanted to get, both of you guys on this stream because I have a really cool, pretty techie, pretty hackerish security lab that our researchers internally developed for us that talks about some macro bypass. Now, I know Ryan and I talk about this a lot when we dive in, and Ryan does this investigations where we see so many of the big attacks over the last weeks, months, years start with something, almost common, benign, a phishing email where somebody gets an email with an attached document. When they run macros, it does some evil magic behind the scenes and compromises their machines. And one of the things that we see and we hear about is, a layered security approach, which is a great approach, adding endpoint controls to the file system controls, to the perimeter telemetry as the attackers come in and out. But we often hear, hey, we have EDR. It's going to catch and block this. And we wanted to kind of dive into that concept a little bit. And that's what I want to show you guys today. So are you guys ready to do some crazy macro scripting and bypass some endpoint controls?
Yeah, so one thing that I am really interested in is when I talk to beginners about like how big companies get breached, it's almost always because somebody opens an official looking document about like a raise they're getting or something they have to sign off on. Often it's like an invoice, and usually it's using a macro script. So this might seem like stupid simple to some people, but this is really how a lot of companies get breached. And it is so simple because it just works really well, and it's really difficult for companies who aren't monitoring various things that Varonis does to not detect this sort of behavior when somebody clicks on the wrong link. So it's really interesting and it's very widespread. So yeah, let's see it.
This is great. I'm really looking forward to it. So let's go ahead. Hopefully you guys can see my screen. This is going to be a little bit of an interactive session. So, chime in if you see something cool, if you want to comment. I think the audience would love to hear your expertise throughout. So in this case, I'm logged into this machine. I'm a regular old, user person here. And down at the bottom, I have my Excel document with some macros inside of it. So I'm just going to open this guy up really quick. Now think of this as you're a regular user. You might get this as part of an email here. And we have our telltale, enable content warning along the top. And there are a lot of cases where it's normal, it's fine, it's okay to do this. There's a lot of reasons that you'd have macros built into something like Excel. For example, if you're doing complex calculations or using it to load in data from other sources for advanced tables. So this is a great warning and it's a great place to help. But this control, there are reasons that you'd click it, especially as Kody, you mentioned, if it's compelling enough to want to load this. Hey, here's the proposed raise chart we're going to give you. Here's your company stock vesting schedule or something. There are plenty of reasons. Here's the invoice that you need and the calculations for whatever you're doing. So
my favorite one that I've seen is like really enticing. It's like an invoice you must approve, or like the IRS will like attack you. But it says enable macros to see information or something like that, that makes it look like there's information there that's really juicy, but you can't see it until you enable macros. And sometimes they even put like a big arrow like pointing to like where it should be, just to try to get the secretary to be like, you just got to press this button and then all the information is going to be there. And of course it's not. Nothing changes when they do that. But at that point, it doesn't matter because they've already got a backdoor.
Right, exactly. And Ryan, this is for you. I know that you're an expert. You take people through our attack labs all the time. this is part of, I believe, our big game ransomware attack lab, and we modeled that off of which attack did we model that off of? I'll ask you for that one.
Yeah, so that was actually based off of the Maze ransomware scenario that we were seeing out in the wild and a few others. And it's interesting. I have a lot of people that sometimes say, well, there's this big yellow button on the top. As a security professional, we should never press that. Like, people know not to do that. But if you think about it from the end user's perspective, I mean, we see that yellow bar with every attachment that we download, and it's almost muscle memory. So even though this time it says macros and the other time it says enable editing, how often are people moving 1,000,000 miles an hour and they just download something and hit the yellow button to start editing? So it's so easy from the end user perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So despite my best training, my best efforts, I'm going to enable the content here. And well, nothing happened in this case, but that seems to be the way it goes with a lot of these. Is you don't see what happens there if they're running something malicious in the background. But let's dive in and see what it actually is going to do in this case, or potentially do. So I'm going to go to View, and I'm going to look at the actual macros in here, and I can see it's in the workbook, and I'm going to edit this guy. Let me just make this full screen so you guys can see it a little bit better. There we go. So in this case, what we have here is our first macro, and it's just a little function, and it's going to pop up a message box and say, hello from our first macro. That's nice. That's inviting. But I guess, it's going to pop up a message box here. And the thing that I want to point out is nothing happened when I opened this up. And this is by design. This macro is not going to load on open. And I think we've gotten pretty good, and you tell me, Kody and Ryan, about people clicking that enable button. But I don't think as an attacker, we're going to jump in there and be like, excuse me, sir or madam, would you please enable this and come into the macro configuration and run this so I can compromise your machine? It's be very polite, right? But I don't think people are going to go for that one.
I've seen some pretty straightforward viruses that just say, please send me money. I don't have the skill to write a ransomware, but I do need the cash, trust me. But I don't think that they're very successful.
Well, hopefully they can use that money to invest in programming classes. I don't know.
It seems like they need it.
So in this case, let's take a look at what this does when I run this macro. And click my little play button here. And, look, nice and friendly. Hello from my first macro. There's a little pop-up window there. So, cool. Pretty straightforward stuff. But if I want to be the real tricky, elite hacker, I need this to execute when we open the Excel by itself. That's the first step. I'm cheating, everybody. I have these commands all written out here so I can copy them instead of trying to spend 4 hours of me typing and mistyping. Nobody wants to see that. So,
is there any way to make the text a little bit bigger in the workbook, or what you're not what you're in now, but what you're about to paste it into?
That is an excellent question. I
just know some people watch on mobile and they shout at me.
Yeah. I can try and see if I can make it a little bit bigger. I wonder if I can do the window zoom on it. If that would help.
Yes, we've done that. We have done that on the stream many a time.
Give me 1 second to paste this in. Cool. So let's go ahead and let me save this since this is meant to run on open. So in this case, we simply change the function what it's calling. So on when it runs, it's going to execute anything within here on workbook open. That's what the workbook_open function does here. So let me close that. Let me close this down. Close all of this down. And go ahead and reopen my workbook here. Okay, so there we go. Our old enable content friend. Click on that, and there we go. Hello from the first macro. So we're off to a good start. As an attacker, getting it to run on open is what you'd want to do. No extra steps. As I like to talk about our customer experience, we like it to be friction-free. So they adopt it. It's good for getting people to adopt security. It's good for people to adopt things like online banking or collaboration, or when you use Office 365. You want to be able to do it as easy and as friction-free as possible. Same thing with our attackers. They're really focused on customer satisfaction. So let's go back in. So now that we know it works on open, easy enough, we want to start doing something a little bit more interesting. Let me copy in my next command here. There we go. So it's also going to execute on workbook open, and we're going to take this a little bit further in this case. What I want to do is I want to create a new shell here. So when the workbook opens, I want it to create a shell, and within that shell, I want to run something pretty straightforward, a who am I command. Something, in Kody, keep me honest, when an attacker compromises a machine, knowing who's running it or who's the account logged in is pretty important. Wouldn't you agree?
Definitely. The first step is always knowing what machine that you're trying to get access to. So if it's even worth it, or what else it might have access to itself.
Sure. Yeah, makes total sense. So I went ahead and saved this. I think a little bit from here on out, I'll just run these macros. We've established they work, but I'll just do it, one more time, just so everybody can see when I open it, it does, in fact, execute on open. So here we go. Enable content. Uh-oh. Wait a minute. We got an access denied, and in this case, Defender has popped up and told us it blocked the action. Bet you guys didn't see that one coming. In this case, this is
go
ahead.
Weird. An Excel file trying to open a command window.
Sure.
That's seems like something that should be flagged by default anyway. Because how many times does that end well?
Right. So in this case, spoiler alert, guys, I knew this was coming, of course. On this machine, we have some additional controls enabled, built into Microsoft Defender that do this. So they have a function that you can enable, and I believe, let me just pull up the page on it. The feature is called attack surface reduction. So it's a great feature. It's in Defender here. And one of the options you have is to block all Office applications from creating child processes. So what we were doing in that macro is essentially when it ran, it was creating a child process in a shell, of course, to run that who am I command. So again, great control. And this is certainly not in any way, from here on out, saying anything bad about Microsoft. I think this is a great control, and I think it's really would be really crucial again to help block some of these attacks, and any endpoint protection would, of course, that has this functionality. But and I know this is hard, and I know we talked about the screen resolution here, but down here, this rule blocks all Office applications from creating child processes. The Office apps include Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote, and Access. So quiz for Ryan and Kody. Let's see. Are there any missing in this list?
Wait, was Excel on there? Or it's not Excel, Outlook.
Excel is on here. Outlook is not. Kody, you won the prize of getting to see more hacking with friends. So yeah, in this case, Outlook is not on here.
I'm going to guess, does it open attachments? Is that why? Because it uses other programs to open attachments, so it need to open a sub process for that, maybe?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is you think, when you open that Excel file or the Word document from your Outlook, it does open that as a sub process, I believe. It'll be really hard to block that.
The Linux person figures it out. Great. That's cool.
So that's pretty tricky stuff. So with this knowledge, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that to my advantage. So here's my old macro before, and I'm going to copy this back in, or my next one back in. Copy that. Paste that guy. So in this case, in my previous one, I was trying to create the shell directly, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new object of Outlook here. And under my Outlook object, I'm going to create that shell. And then I'm going to execute the who am I command. So that's pretty tricky stuff to get past it.
Yeah, so basically, like, Microsoft created another hoop you have to jump through. And provided you pick the right option in basically a multiple choice quiz, then you can proceed with having a sub-process spawned and do all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So let's. I'm not going to close the workbook and open back up again. I hope everyone trusts me to that this happens on open. So let me just go ahead and run the macro here right from this. So what we should see here in a second. There it goes. The who am I command returned Varonis Lab IT admin. So that's the account that I'm logged in with.
Nice.
I could prove it to you, but it's running the command anyway. So that was pretty cool and pretty tricky. So let me just kind of let everybody visualize that very quickly here. I'm going to just uncomment this line, or I guess I can't uncomment this line because my keyboard doesn't work.
Highlight it and cut it.
There you go. Look at that. Solve that problem. Cool. So what this is just going to create a PowerShell and sleep it so it stays open. And so we see the process just continue to run and never finish here before the pop-up window, just to see what that looks like. So not that I really have to save it, but let me go ahead and run that. And then don't worry about this. We're going to come back to that in a second. So down here I have my Process Explorer open. And if I look here's actually my Outlook. Here's my PowerShell, and then here's my my shell down here. So you can see it's running underneath the Outlook process. Hopefully that's visible. And if I scroll down a little bit further, here's my Excel, and you notice there's nothing under Excel. So Excel was able to spawn the new Outlook objects, which we saw above, but there's nothing running underneath it here. So that's pretty cool and pretty tricky, and just a way to visualize kind of exactly what's happening. So this is a new process that's running, even though it came from Excel at this in this case. Pretty cool stuff, huh?
Yeah. No, this is a very, very tricky way of. This is not like some sort of like 0-day exploit. This is literally just using the built-in features of Windows to open up shells and start doing things that the user has really no way of knowing what's happening once they click that little OK button.
Yeah, that's pretty kind of cool and scary stuff. I'm just going to go ahead and OK out of that. But now that we know that we can run some stuff on here and bypass the controls, and that was the big ta-da in this, is that and again, I'm not saying anything bad. This is a great control, and if you are able to, I would definitely recommend enabling this if you can. But it just is a good example that attackers are relentless in trying to find ways to bypass controls. It's an ever escalating cat and mouse game for them. And this is just an easy kind of demonstration that it is possible despite our best efforts. And this is one more reason, and Ryan, you can talk a little bit about this, is to have those layered security controls in place, to have multiple points where we can try and stop them, or one more way and one more link in the chain to try and detect them as they have to go through and jump through hoops to bypass the controls we put in place.
Yeah, I mean, people talk about defense in depth all the time, but it really is so true. There's no perfect security solution out there that's going to block and stop everything. So, we just need to have as much monitoring in place as possible so that we give ourselves the best shot.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, Ryan and Kody, I think this is going to start getting into the area of expertise for both of you in terms of doing, Ryan, the investigations that we see and we help our customers with, and Kody on the other side. This is a surprise mano-y-mano, hackers versus defenders type of situation here. That's why we're doing the ultimate alliance. It's a little bit different. Attackers, defenders sitting down together, looking at some cool tech stuff. But what we're going to do now is we're going to take it to the next level. Of course, we know that attackers, sometimes they get access to the local machines, but oftentimes, especially with these type of phishing attacks, are over the internet. So we need a way for them to establish that command and control channel to be able to run commands or get data back out from the systems. So that's what we're doing in this one. So again, I'm not going to close the workbook and open it up again, but on Workbook Open, what I've done is I've just added a couple extra functions in here. The first one is just the run command, and if I scroll up to the top, I apologize again if it's a little bit hard to see. It's the exact same command that we just looked at in the previous window where we spawn the new object of Outlook, and we run our commands under there. But what this does is it basically just takes the command we want to pass it, passes it to this function, and then it executes and returns that information. Once it does, the next part up, we get the output here. It'll send it to the message box, of course, so it pops up, but then it'll also send it to a server. And that's what this function right here does. What it does is it creates an instance of a WebSocket, basically. We're running on the local machine, but of course you can run this across the network or from around the world, but just a regular HTTP connection over port 5000. And what we're going to do with this function is it's just going to be a simple HTTP post here. So we're going to get the results from our run command. We're going to set up this connection to our attacker server, where they're monitoring these. And then we're going to send that data across the wire. And we're also setting up in the object when we create it some of the user agent string information here. We're going to pretend to be a Mozilla 4, compatible browser before we send that. Now, Ryan, I did want to ask you about this as I get the next part of this set up. I know during the investigations, we look and we try and detect some of these signs of attackers. In your investigations, how would you detect something like this? What would you do, or where would you look to try and spot some of these weird command and control channels?
Web proxy is a big one for us. Yeah. A lot of organizations are just starting to monitor web proxy, maybe not necessarily for this perspective, but seeing these pieces of traffic going back out, it's huge through the web proxy logs. And especially if we can correlate it back to things like user agents. So, trying to obfuscate or cover your tracks with something that looks more like a typical user agent, I think that's brilliant from the attacker side. Yeah. Because oftentimes we're trying to do correlations of, do we see strange web proxy transactions originating from an atypical user agent? Do we see this coming from PowerShell? Do we see it coming from some other application or process running on the machine? Because like Kody mentioned earlier, it's kind of strange to see something that looks normal coming from something else that looks normal, but the two together, doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, so if I was an attacker also, this is a great setup for, this was part of the Maze ransomware attack, or it was kind of based off of it. So if I'm writing ransomware, my hope is that somebody has accessed this or opened it that has wide access on the system to a wide variety of files, hopefully which are important, or even better, access to some sort of process that interacts with all the different files on the entire company's servers. Right. Like an automated process or something that has permission to touch all this stuff. And then if I can start in one position and escalate up to having control of something that's allowed to touch all these things, it makes Ryan's job a lot more difficult to have something that's authorized to be going in and touching all these files and is doing its job, basically be hijacked or otherwise used to do the stuff that's going to generate a lot of attention. If the secretary who's never opened PowerShell, in her life is suddenly spawning 52 PowerShell windows and sending out a bunch of weird requests to different servers from a user agent that's never been seen before. That's really the difference between the level of sophistication between a smash and grab job where you're just going to encrypt everything that one user has access to and hope that they don't have any sort of access control. Because a lot of organizations do that. Maybe the lowest secretary has access to absolutely every single file on the entire network, and they just don't know that they do. So it's security by obscurity, and then everything would get encrypted, and it doesn't matter, whether or not the ransomware or the malware is sophisticated enough to work its way up the chain and become a domain controller or something that's going to be going around as an automated process and not a user that can be more easily monitored.
Right. So. Yeah, makes total sense. Cool. So what I did just really quick while we were diving into that, I started the CNC server here. So just a little, something to catch that, catch the web connection on this side. You can see it's running on the desktop, port 5000. And then in my Wireshark, I opened it up and I set it to watch port 5000. We don't need to see everything else going on. We know that this is where it's going, and kind of for the sake of demonstration here. So let me jump back over to my workbook and my Visual Basic. Minimize it. There we go. So let's go ahead and I saved this, but I'm just going to run this quickly. Okay. So here's the IP config information. So this is what I ran as the command that I wanted to send. So we have our DNS information or DNS suffix here, our IP address information, our gateway, so on and so forth, all this good stuff. So I'm going to say OK there. And then I'm going to bring up my Wireshark, and I'm going to bring up my command and control server. So here in my command and control server, so as the attacker, I can see here's that information. So here's the IP config information from the compromised workstation that I'm on right now. And when I set up this connection to be able to send it, it's just a regular old basic HTTP post. So here it is in my Wireshark, and if we look down here in the packet information, it's human readable enough, right? But here we can validate the information is in here. If you look, the IP address, it's real small on my screen too. So 10.6.154.198 or 10.61. Yep, there it is. So you can see the same information came across the wire. Now, Ryan, even if you were monitoring some of the web traffic or with the web proxy, I feel like this is pretty easy to detect. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, we would hope. I mean, having the monitoring capabilities in place, that the biggest issue is oftentimes we're not looking for it, which I think is quite challenging after the fact.
Right.
As soon as we see something like this flag up, then we also want to look elsewhere too. Like Kody mentioned before, you might be trying to cover your tracks by using an account that has access to a lot of different things. And that's where we're trying to, first of all, if we can proactively get rid of things like global access, but then also, a little bit of user behavioral analysis, understand how users typically interact, and then look for the abnormalities.
And there are definitely I'm sorry, go ahead, Kody.
I was going to say, if I was running this show, of course, I wouldn't just be, kicking out the information in plain text over HTTP. Sure. I would take the extra and very practical step of encoding it into an image of a horse and then uploading it to my Farmers Only account. Just because, you really want to make the behavior difficult to distinguish from typical, just messing around the computer behavior. So if I really wanted to exfiltrate that data to connect back to my command and control server, maybe I would just pick something that, someone would be doing that's annoying behavior, but not enough to actually ban, and would still maybe, fall under something that's like not a business appropriate thing to do, but like just happens so often that it's overlooked.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. There's all sorts of ways to do this, and even trickier ways to do some of this. If I was an attacker, if I was going to do this, and Ryan, I'm going to maybe steal your thunder a little bit. We talk about this a lot, but I would encode this and maybe send it out over DNS. HTTP in a post using a port 5000. That's something weird, unusual. And in, not that you're dumping the full packet captures of everything on your network. That would be kind of crazy, but this is definitely something that would warrant a little bit more investigation here. But I would try and get it out in a little bit more stealthy of a way. And it just so happens that our attackers who are coming up with this method have thought of that too. So that's going to be the next thing that I'm going to do.
Wait, they didn't use the Farmers Only API? Okay, all right, fine. I guess we can. All right, fine. There's lots of ways to exfiltrate data. We'll do this one.
Steganography to Farmers Only. That's
How do you stop that? You can't stop people's hearts. Write a rule for that. I dare you.
Listen, they're just trying to find love in this crazy world, Kody. I'm just saying, there's nothing wrong with that. We all want to be loved.
Yeah, I guess DNS is a good second choice. And I have seen a lot of tools do this where they'll just pick a plausible seeming domain or something so close to something legitimate that you're like, okay, did Microsoft just spin up like a new domain for like this weird product that I haven't seen before, like the 1,000th time it's done that?
Right.
And then a couple domain requests to that just to or a couple DNS requests to that just to get across the base information to establish a connection back to a command and control server is probably going to be pretty hard to notice.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean,
go ahead, Ryan.
Think about the volume of DNS traffic every day. If you're just from a pure log analysis standpoint, hundreds of thousands, millions, tens of millions of events per day. You can't go through that manually. You need some sort of automated process. And, I guess it's a cliche and people say it all the time, but it's like finding a needle in a needle stack at that point.
Right. that I like it. I mean, it's a cliche probably for a reason though, Ryan, I would imagine. Cool. So I think that's, the next thing is we want to try and cover our tracks. We want to make it even harder for the defender. Sorry, Ryan. This is, we're not making your life easy here as these attackers. So next up in the next series of commands that I pasted in, very similar here. We're changing the run command to a ping just to, again, show it's a little bit different. But down here, we notice we have two new functions, or one of the same function, send to server, and then we have send to server ENC. And we're returning the same string output. So not really going to go through the run command again, same thing that we looked at. The really kind of cool and juicy parts are going to be the send to server encrypted down here. And that function is right here. So same type of setup. We're sending it to a different site on the machine /ENC. That's just to help us separate it when we look at it in the packet capture. Same type of setup here with the user agent. It's going to be just a regular post again. But the thing that we're going to do is we're going to run it through this new function, encrypt data. And that's the guy down here. So what we're going to do with that, excuse me, it's up top. I went the wrong way. Encrypt data right here. What we're going to do is, Kody, just like you said, or you mentioned, we want to make it a little bit more difficult. Instead of doing steganography in this point where we could hide it in the bits of an image, we're going to do something a little bit more straightforward. And it's called encrypt, but it's not exactly encryption. We're going to run this through base 64 encoding. So we're going to change the encoding on the string, make it a little bit more difficult to read. And this is, and Kody and Ryan, you probably run into this all the time. Kody, maybe you've even tried to sneak things through this way. But base 64 encoding is just a really straightforward way to change it from being human readable text to the human eye, nonsense. It makes it not readable. Kody, is that something you've ever done or before in terms of setting this up?
Absolutely. Base 64 is really commonly used for this because if you're taking something like code that has a bunch of weird characters or symbols, or if you're just taking output from a command and looking to transport it, if you try to do that in a lot of other ways, it just introduces a lot of complexity to sending that over like an HTTP connection or encoding it and sending it. So I find that the most straightforward way of doing that is always just wrapping it in base 64. I even had little microcontrollers that all they do is just do a request and then take the data, unbase 64 it, and run the code. And I could just have like this much code run on a tiny microcontroller because it's so easy to just transport stuff with base 64. So that's super commonly used and also not suspicious because applications compress data with this all the time, or not really compress, but just make it easy to transport all the time. So you see base 64 data flying all over a network constantly, and it's really not that suspicious. It's not going to raise a lot of red flags.
Yeah, for sure. But we want to add a little extra wrinkle to this. Kody, we know we want to throw you off, and Ryan, we know you're out there. We know you're watching. We want to make life just, again, a little bit more difficult. And I have to apologize for that. We're making this investigation really tough for you. What we're doing is once we get that, instead of just doing it in regular base 64, we're going to break that string up into segments. And for the characters here, we're going to add one to them to make it a little bit more garbled. I'm not going to walk through each line of the code kind of line by line, but we're changing it up just enough here as we go through this function. So it's just a counter, does a little for loop. So it loops through all the data that we have. And we add one to the character code of every character that we're coming through here to change it up so it doesn't look like just regular old base 64. So Kody, on your microcontroller, when you get this information, you try and run it through there, it's going to turn out as nonsense on the other end because it's not just regular old base 64. You can't.
It's salted. You salted my base 64.
There you go. So again, exactly that. We're going to make it a little bit more difficult. Now, I'll show you guys what the output of that looks like. And remember, we're going to just do a ping to 888. I think that's the, Google. I think that's Google. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's go ahead and run this guy. Here we go. Doing cool things. Let me bring back up my Wireshark and my command and control channel. So here we go. Here's the ping result. This is the regular kind of non-encrypted. So we sent it to both in the functions, the regular send to server and the send to server encrypted, so we can kind of compare and contrast. So here is that unencrypted data. We caught it just like before. Here's an example of the again, this is not encrypted in the true sense, but here is that obfuscated string of data that we sent through. And then here's the de-obfuscated version of that as well. And we can see it matches here.
So I like this because there are some levels of like traffic analysis that will automatically like go into base 64 data and just look at it. So if this was something really, really obvious and it was just base 64, then this could still be uncovered and you could see that, hey, this is abnormal traffic. Like, why are you sending the IP address of this workstation like to an external server? But by salting it or just making it so it can't automatically just be decoded, it means that, anything doing traffic analysis is probably going to assume that a web application encrypted some data, base 64'd it, and then sent it across. And it's not going to stand out as suspicious because applications do this all the time.
Sure. And just really quick, and Ryan, I do have a question for you for a second, just to show you what this looks like. Here's the regular HTTP post again. Here's the ping results. That would be equivalent to this top bit up here. And then down here, here's the /enc, so the other post. So here's that information going across the wire. It is this obfuscated string here. And you can see, again, no clear text or no human readable text in that section. And then on the attacker side catching it, we've reversed our obfuscation process. So Ryan, when looking at the proxy traffic and when doing some of that monitoring and analysis, how would you kind of catch this or pick something like this up in terms of, you're looking at the traffic flow, and let's say it is this exact thing here. We're doing some post commands out on a strange port. What would we typically look for when doing some of this analysis?
Well, I think to Kody's point, without the salting, we can just look for the base64 code pretty easily. However, that minor change is really genius to making this a whole lot more complex from our side. If we're talking about DNS traffic and the DNS tunneling aspect, we could be looking at things like entropy of the subdomain, and then also a combination of that with the domain itself. Where are we seeing a statistically high volume of requests going to a specific domain with some sort of strange entropy subdomain on top of it. I might also be looking for failed events too. If these are DNS requests and we're not getting responses, a large volume of responses to a single domain, that could be a giveaway as well. Specifically, if we're talking about tens of thousands of these things, because if it's any worthwhile data, it's not just going to be one. In this case, it could be one if it's small, but in the grand scheme of things, if we're trying to actually get some files out, it's probably going to be a lot more.
Can I also jump in and say one thing that I think is hilarious to see sometimes is companies being like, were we breached? And I've seen the screenshot that's just like DNS traffic, 1 terabyte. And they're like, yes, we were breached. How are you sure? Yes. So like very large volumes of data being exchanged over DNS, like that's not normal or good. Of course, like at this stage, we're just setting up the CNC server, so we haven't really done anything yet. And like if we're doing ransomware, of course, that's never going to happen. Unless we're like backing up all the data because we want to save it for some reason, which we probably don't. So like, yeah, it's kind of hard to see this traffic unless like they're literally using high entropy strings going out to DNS server that's hitting the same like web domain or subdomain the entire time. And you're like, why are we resolving like 10,000 like random strings from this subdomain we've never hit before? Like,
yeah. And to Ryan's point, kind of the defense, there are a lot of different things that we can look at too. This is just, again, an example here, but if the attacker is setting up that new domain, it might be new. It might not have a reputation. We might not be able to classify it. So think about that, doing some of the analysis of the traffic. Is it something that other people have gone to before? Is this unique or different? Does it have a reputation? Does it have a low reputation? Is it hosted or going to a place in the world that is unusual or odd? These are all key pieces of information that Ryan, you can tell me that, if I'm incorrect here, but you would use to suss out some of this when doing an investigation. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, using as many resources as possible is key. Going through this, I'm starting to think our side's a little bit harder right now, but hopefully having the monitoring in place at least gives us a chance here.
Well, this is also why supply chain attacks are so devastating, because as soon as you've whitelisted the infrastructure of a vendor, I mean, this is also very much about current events. If I, as the attacker, have gone out of my way to compromise some property that's just not properly secured of one of your vendors, and you've already whitelisted all their stuff, like, good luck. Like it's just going to look like they've added a new service or something or another domain to handle extra traffic. And it's going to be extremely difficult to know that that's not legitimate once, you've whitelisted this because you've installed some piece of third-party software.
Yeah. So this, while we were talking there, I want to take this to the next level. We talk about the attacker and being remote, but what I want to do is I want to put the command in command and control. Some of this stuff has all been static commands running here, and an attacker could potentially do that for maybe some of the initial exploitation phases, but remotely, they'll want to be able to do things, move laterally, learn to escalate their privileges, just map out the network, do that recon once they've gotten in somewhere to learn about what they're doing, and then eventually do something, exfiltrate data at that point. And I want to show that in this example here too quickly. So I've pasted in my last script. We're not doing the regular old send to server here. We're starting the C2, and it's a new function here that basically just puts us into a while loop. So it's going to set up the connection. In this case, it's going to C2. So, and just another site, just for simplicity's sake, they are setting up the user agent, all that other good stuff. And what it's going to do is when I run command, it's going to check and see if it's ever a stop command. If it is, it's going to break me out of this loop. So keep doing this when it's not equal to stop. But this will allow me as a remote attacker to issue commands. So when I send it through, it's going to call the run command here, and it's going to do whatever it is that I've asked it to do. So let's take a look at that from the attacker side. So go ahead and run this. Thinking about it. Okay. So we're started getting data from C2. Enter your command. So let's
pop calc.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, I thought you were inevitably leading to that.
I am. You ruined the surprise for everybody, Kody.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
It's funny that you should mention that. So I just ran the who am I, the same command that I ran earlier. I can run a ping command. I can do net user. You can see that I'm actually leaning oddly forward because my other keyboard's not working, but I've gotten access to another keyboard over here. Throughout the stream, I've hacked it. So I can see who's the net user on this machine. So what other accounts I have on here. I could run net group or and /d or domain, I think, to list the domain groups for things like that. Or as Kody mentioned, going to go ahead and just type in calc.
If you come back to your computer and the calculator's open and you didn't open it, something very bad has happened.
This is the true sign that you've fully and totally owned the computer is opening calc. It's I guess we call it the Bellwether, maybe. This is it. This is the sign.
When you're teaching new hackers what's allowed and what's not allowed to show someone you've hacked their computer, it's a lot easier to just tell them to open the calculator than get into the ethics of the whole thing. So yes, this is the official sign of someone else has gotten unauthorized access to your computer and can launch applications arbitrarily, which is pretty much game over because at that point they can open a Powershell and just really get to town.
Oh yeah. Definitely scary stuff here at this point. And like you said, Kody, from here, I can open calc, but I can do anything else. At this point, if I was an attacker and I've compromised a machine, I would want to do that recon. I'd want to see what else is out there. I might use my command prompt to do like a reverse DNS lookup to just see what other server names are out there. To see if there's anything juicy looking. If I've identified some kind of cool stuff, I might try and connect to it. Or, of course, as Ryan, I think, is more than well aware of, I might want to try and do something like maybe Kerberoasting to elevate my privileges, to look for an account that has higher level rights if I'm just a regular user. And ultimately, at the end of the day, if the attacker's gone through this trouble, they're looking for something. They're doing this for a reason, often to steal data, maybe for ransom, to ransom back before detonating ransomware. And of course, if I can open calc, I can run, whatever ransomware that I want at this point. So it's this is a great kind of intro and first stage to all of the different parts of the attack chain that we definitely see and things that we talk about in a lot of cases. So thank you guys for joining me with that. And just a quick kind of shout out, and Kody, thank you for being on this. And hopefully everybody watching on the Varonis channel is familiar with you, but if they're not, I'd like to just kind of flip over really quick. Can you tell us a little bit about SecurityFWD? I'd love, again, if people don't know, to check out your channel.
Of course. So twice a week, we do the Hacking with Friends live stream on the SecurityFWD YouTube channel, although we also broadcast it out on the Varonis brand LinkedIn, Twitch, my Twitter. So we put it all over the place. We have live Fridays now where we go through the InfoSec events of the week as well as talking about some of the questions we've gotten over the week. And then we also, I think this week we've been going through a hacker operating system series where we try out and show you how to get started with a variety of different hacker OSs you might have heard of and wanted to try. So if you want to stay up to date with all the great InfoSec tools that are out there and meet some other of our hacking friends who are interested in this sort of stuff, then you can hang out with us, become part of the community. You can sign up here to be notified when we go live and when we're doing a lot of the stuff that we're doing. So we're doing some special events coming up. And you can also check out on hackingwithfriends.com or info.varonis.com/securityforward. That's FWD. You can check out this page where we have our featured episodes, which have some really great ones, as well as our upcoming and some of our better performing episodes there. So also just wanted to mention, if somebody gets to this point on your computer in the demo and they want to do ransomware, the two hopes you have are Have you limited access of this person in your company so they don't have access to everything? That's hope one. And do you have some sort of rule against that person just arbitrarily encrypting every file on the entire network? Is there anything that will stop them? If you don't, it's bad news.
Kind of bad news. Actually, Ryan, that's a great segue too. Without kind of belaboring it too much, what are some of the ways that people could detect a malicious user or a compromised machine inside the network doing some of that? What would you recommend that they do, kind of as a final takeaway from this, in terms of putting detection or protection controls in place?
Yeah, my biggest takeaway from this is it's really way too easy from the attacker side. So they're going to get in at some point. We just need to be able to have the monitoring in the right position to be able to capture the activity once it's happening. Monitoring users accessing devices, monitoring users interacting with files, folders, different areas of the network. We need to have as much monitoring as possible so that we can build rules on top of that and give ourselves a fighting chance. So always here to help. If anybody needs help with investigating or anything like that, just give us a quick shout. We'll jump on a session.
That's a great point, and thank you. And thank you all for watching. This was a great episode. I think I definitely learned a lot going through this, and I thought it was enlightening and fascinating. And thank you guys for coming along with me. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Kody, for coming along in this journey with me. I think hopefully the audience will find this interesting and informative as well. And as Ryan mentioned, we're absolutely here to help. If you are a customer or prospect, and something weird like this happens, if Calc pops off and you need someone to jump on and help, reach out to us. Ryan or somebody on his team will be happy to jump on and help you go through this investigation and do some of that triage. So we're here to help. And hopefully you found this informative and interesting. We'll, of course, put a link to Kody's channel and Kody's show in the description. And as always, we'll put a link to our Varonis help page there too, if you'd like to reach out to us and learn a little bit more. So thank you guys for joining me. Thank you all for watching me. It's been great, and we'll see you again soon. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.